they'll get elected, they'll become the administration. Often they learn the facts of life as an administration,
Yeah.
and then on a dime, they will immediately turn about and disown everything they previously said.
Yes. An active member of the Conservative Party for a quarter of a century and a councillor for 19 years, Julian Ellacott has served at all levels of the Conservative Voluntary Party as a branch, association, area, and regional chairman. Elected in 2024 as chairman of the National Convention and deputy chairman of the party board following the party's historic defeat, he has now been tasked with putting his 25 years of experience into rebuilding the voluntary party and the party spirit. We are delighted to have him with us today on ModCons. Julian, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. So, Julian, you are chairman of the National Convention.
Indeed.
How does it feel?
Well, it feels very special. I'm very honoured and humbled to have
Yeah.
been elected by fellow volunteers.
Yes,
So
that's
it is a special feeling. And I
amazing.
know I'm only going to be here for a short period of time,
Right.
term limited and elected every year. So I've got to make the most of it.
Definitely. And so a lot of people who might be in the party or not part of the party don't really know what that is. What does the chairman of the National Convention do? Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I have to say, I've been a volunteer for 25 years,
Yeah.
and I probably only knew what the chairman of the National Convention did for about the last five.
Right.
So the National Convention is about 850 volunteers,
Yeah.
senior volunteers, association chairman, area officers, regional officers, key members of the CWO.
Yeah.
And so they represent the senior volunteers. And each year the National Convention elects five of us to the party board.
Yeah.
The chairman, president, and three vice presidents.
Right.
So the convention is really those senior volunteers elected in each constituency, area, and region.
Yeah.
And like I say, they then elect five of us to be on the board.
Amazing. Amazing. And what do you love most about the role?
It's very multifaceted.
Yeah.
So it can literally range from 1 minute being here at CCHQ in the boardroom in front of
Maggie.
Lady Thatcher, discussing the budget for CCHQ, discussing how we select parliamentary candidates,
Nice.
right through to the next minute. I might step out of the room, I might have a call from an association chairman anywhere in the country
Yeah.
who wants to know where they find something on Toolkit.
Right.
Or how they do something in VoteSource.
Yeah.
So there's this mixture of party strategy, long-term thinking
Yeah.
through to day-to-day troubleshooting, being there to support volunteers in the party.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Adam Smith, and he always spoke of the invisible hand of the market, helping to set prices and allocate resources. In some ways, myself and the other four national officers, I think of us as being like an invisible hand within the party.
Nice.
Often we're here to cajole things. Association officers will contact us and say, something's got stuck in the system.
Yeah.
Can you help? So we often go and speak to someone at CCHQ and unblock it for them.
Right.
A lot of it goes on behind the scenes, and rightly so. We're
Yeah.
not frontline politicians. And I like to think we're just there to ease things along,
Right.
as well as to make sure that volunteers' voices are heard here at CCHQ.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like we need that in Westminster, some people to unblock the system.
Well, it's a different type of politician.
Yeah,
We're all people behind the scenes,
amazing.
frontline.
I love that. I love that. And that's so important as well. I think when people think about going into politics, a lot of people always think about the front line, but we also need people in associations, people to actually make things happen. So it's really, really valuable. And it's great that we can show people that side of the party as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you started in the party 25 years ago, as you said, as a borough councillor for Reigate and Banstead. What made you want to stand as a councillor?
Good question. And in fact, I was prompted to stand for the council, not of my own choosing.
Right.
When I moved to Reigate or Redhill, where I lived after university, I'd been a member before. I wanted to join at the local association. It was a classic example of what we often don't do right as a party. I've had real difficulty finding out where the association was and how to get in touch. This was before the internet was a big thing. You couldn't join online, but I couldn't find where the association was. I managed to track down where the office was, went to the office with my cash to join, knocked on the door, and the agent there, who gladly took my money, 21-year-old offering to join the party. She didn't have many of those in a day. And she was very quick thinking. She was a really good agent, the old style agent. And immediately she said to me, "Are you on the electoral register?" And I said, "Well, I think so." She said, "Well, make sure you go back and check." She knew that we had
Yeah.
all out elections the next year,
Mm.
about 6 months down the line. She already had her eye on me
Yeah.
and thought, right, you're going to stand in
Yeah.
an unwinnable seat.
Right.
Then over the course of the 6 months, she upgraded me to a marginal seat
Nice.
because we had to find 51 candidates.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I said, well, yeah, fine, it'd be a great experience. And we won the seat off Labour. So I
Amazing.
was a councillor.
That's
I
so good.
probably would have done it at some point, but it
Yeah.
happened a bit sooner than I would have chosen. But she was right on me,
Yeah, that's
and
so good.
she knew that she wanted me to stand.
That's
So.
amazing. Like I feel like a lot of people get in through like talent spotting from people in their local associations who are just like, actually, we could really do with you.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lesson there as well in
Yeah.
that, we as senior volunteers, we have to be quite assertive sometimes. We have
Yeah.
to, okay, ask. Sometimes we don't even ask.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes we need to go a bit further than asking,
Yeah.
and we need to kind of push people into roles, whether it's standing for the council, whether it's standing as an association officer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to push
Yeah,
and get
absolutely.
people to go forward.
Yeah. And it's a good point you make about like associations. I think when I first joined my association at the beginning, I joined, but then I didn't really hear anything. And I think a lot of associations have worked now to try and plug that gap where you're actually a member, but you're not like being asked, like you say,
Yeah,
to come and
yeah,
volunteer. Obviously, you're invited to events and things, but say, actually, can you knock on some doors or deliver this? And
yeah.
I think associations have got better at it.
Well, that's right. And I think until associations, and we'll never be perfect at it,
Yeah.
but on the one hand, we need to become better as senior volunteers at asking and
Yeah.
stroke pushing people. And then on the other hand, I think we need to sort of tell our new members, look, we're not a perfect organization. If you
Yeah.
don't hear from us, if we're not asking you to do stuff, beat our
Keep
door
trying.
down.
Yeah.
Keep asking how
Yeah.
you get involved. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to do that,
Right.
but we need to
That's
try
it.
and get people to be pushy sometimes,
That's
don't
it. No, you do need to be
otherwise
pushy.
they'll drift off and do something else.
Yeah. And it's two legs that we need.
Absolutely.
So we first actually met campaigning for a by-election in the Southwest, and you were area chairman at the time and still live in the area. What do you love about the Southwest of England?
Well, I was born and grew up in Cornwall.
Love it.
You might not be able to tell it from my accent nowadays, but I grew up on a farm. In fact, over the weekend, I was visiting my parents who still live on the farm.
Amazing.
And who knows, one day I might go back there. So I love the Southwest. I
Yeah.
now live in Bristol, which is, some people wouldn't say that's the West Country,
Yeah.
but it's a nice distance, close to London. I can get here
True.
for this, but I can also go home. It's just so varied. You've got lovely beaches
Yeah.
all around the coastline. You've got the farmland. You've got moorland. I went to school right next to Dartmoor,
Yeah.
and the people are wonderful, bit laid back, nice pace of
I
life,
like that.
very friendly and welcoming,
Yeah.
especially if you're really from the southwest.
Yeah.
But they're friendly to outsiders
They
too.
are. Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't choose to live anywhere else.
Yeah.
I did live in Surrey for a while. I did like Surrey, but I did then gravitate back towards the southwest if I
Yeah.
could.
Surrey is lovely. I love campaigning there. But the Southwest, you're right. Everyone is so, so friendly. I think I went to a sweet shop once in Bristol, and the lady was so sweet to me. And I just thought, this is the nicest place in the world. So yes, so you actually, as the area chair in the Southwest, you probably have, or you no doubt have a lot of experience working with the Lib Dems. And I think that a part of their appeal is that people feel like they're quite harmless, they're warm, they're fuzzy, everything's okay. They're a vote that's not really going to do anything radical. But anyone involved in local politics and campaigning will know that they're pretty ruthless in their tactics. What do you think they do well, and how do we dispel that false persona that they project?
Good question. So to answer the first part, what do they do well?
Mm,
I think in most cases they're very diligent.
yeah.
On the one hand. So they go out, they do the pavement politics, they find the potholes, they report the potholes. And then second, they're good at communicating
Mm,
mostly.
yeah.
So they then tell people what they're doing.
Right.
So they don't only find the potholes, report them, get them filled in. They then bang on about it
Mm,
back to the residents, which again, sometimes we Conservatives can be a little bit on the reticent side
yeah.
to take credit for what we've done.
Yeah.
But that's a key part of, making sure that we can get elected and re-elected
That's it.
is closing that loop. You said we did,
Yeah.
and then we tell you what we did. So I think that's what they're good at.
Yeah.
Then in terms of what we shouldn't emulate,
Yeah.
is what we often see. I wouldn't say always, and all Lib Dems are like this, but too often they are just very good at turning about
Yeah.
180
Yeah.
degree
Totally.
when it
Totally.
suits them.
Yeah.
So no real core principles
Yeah.
to stick to. And that goes nationally and locally.
Hmm.
They call themselves Liberal Democrats, yet we see often at Westminster they vote for the most illiberal measures
Right.
there,
Yeah.
cracking down on people's freedoms,
Yeah.
restricting being nanny statist
Yeah.
rather than being liberal.
Mm.
And at local level, we see that sometimes when they're in opposition on a council, they have one set of policies, they'll campaign on those,
Yeah.
they'll get elected, they'll become the administration. Often they learn the facts of life as an administration,
Yeah.
and then on a dime, they will immediately turn about and disown everything they previously said.
Yes.
Instead of holding their hands up and saying, perhaps we didn't realize that, say, life was this difficult running the council.
Yeah.
We criticised the Tories and said, pretended it could be done a completely different
Right.
way. Now we've been hit with the harsh reality of running the show,
Yeah.
and they disown their previous position,
Yeah.
and just try and stay in power off the back of that.
That's it.
So I do genuinely think that we as Conservatives are more principled than that.
Yes.
Even when we're in opposition, and I see this in lots of places, we play an honourable role as opposition.
Yeah.
We acknowledge difficulties
Mm.
that Lib Dem Labour administrations have.
Yeah.
We don't always take the easy attacks. And I happen to think that there's a grown-up section of the electorate
That.
that rewards us for
Yeah.
that, and we don't always gain from the cheap shots.
True, true. No, that's true. And I think people do appreciate that honesty. If you hold your hands up and say, look, we kind of underestimated this, or this didn't quite go the way we thought it was, I think it's like a breath of fresh air. That's what the people
Yeah,
want.
yeah. People want grown up. They want honesty.
Yeah.
Yes, we can never. There'll always be a place for taking political shots.
Right.
And we need to play the game at times as
Yes.
well as anyone else.
Right.
But I think the Lib Dems have taken it to a different level, and we shouldn't follow them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I think sometimes we are a bit, like you say, a bit reserved about, shouting when we do things well, but also in opposition, we can be quite generous to the opposition,
Yeah.
which can be a good thing and not. Depends on where you're
I think
coming
it
from.
depends on the situation. I
Yeah.
think this is another great thing about us as a party, and this contrasts us with Reform, for example.
Yeah.
At local government level, and when I was a councillor, when I was a group leader, it was very much, you are your own group.
Yeah.
Yes, we have conservative principles, but
Right.
we decide what our position is on any issue within the council.
Right.
We're not dictated to from this building or by the CCA. We see that completely different with Reform,
Right.
where they seem to be taking orders from central, Reform headquarters,
Yeah.
even at the most minute level about the flags they can fly or this,
Yes.
that, or the other. Whereas we are a localist party based on conservative principles. But we would have councils in Surrey where, we would collect the bins on this frequency,
Right.
or we would have a theatre, but the next council wouldn't have a theatre.
Yes. No.
We would decide our own policies based on our local
I
circumstances.
think that's really good. And I think that's always a good tactic, I guess, or strategy when things are going maybe the other way nationally. It's good to show that we actually have our own identity locally, and your local person is your local person. They're
Yeah.
not like taking orders
Well,
from
it's
the
that
top.
good blend. If you elect a local Conservative, you
Yeah.
get someone who has conservative principles,
Yeah.
sound money, running things competently, keeping
Absolutely.
tax as low as possible. But you also know that they are going to look out for the interests of the
Yeah.
local residents,
Yeah.
and not be dictated to from some central
Absolutely.
posting.
That's it. And also give you bin collections more than once a fortnight.
In general, yes, but if a
In
Conservative
general.
administration feels that less than fortnightly is appropriate, then I'm sure they'll have good reasons for doing so.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You grew up in a farm, you said, in
Yes,
Cornwall.
indeed. Yep.
You grew up on a farm. Many in rural communities, and as someone who's part of the CRF, Conservative Rural Forum, we speak to a lot of rural communities, and I feel like farmers and rural communities in general have been at the forefront of the national discussion over the last year. but they still feel like their voices are not heard. They feel that they're not represented in Westminster politics. And you can see this in the way that the government has kind of brushed off British farmers' concerns over the family farm tax. What do you, as someone who has a rural background, what do you think people in Westminster need to know or fail to understand about farming?
Um, I think in many ways most politicians just don't understand farming.
Yeah.
And they don't understand. I mean, many politicians, particularly, Labour and on the left of the spectrum, just don't understand business.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But I think in some ways, farming is almost like an extreme form of business in
Yes.
so many different ways.
Yeah.
It's very exposed to the market. It's a
Yeah.
very competitive industry. If particularly if you're on the receiving end of having to sell your output
Yeah.
to supermarkets and so on. It's a very harsh business. It's very exposed literally to things like weather.
Yeah.
And almost in all these ways, it's a more volatile type of business than
Mm.
any other.
Yeah.
And so if you're a politician, like say, particularly Labour, Lib Dem, Green, SNP, and you don't understand business, you definitely don't understand farming.
Yeah.
And in that respect, I think, we do understand business and therefore we're closest to understand
Yeah.
farming. But I think even sometimes we as a party don't go to the lengths of understanding farming as much as we should.
Yeah.
We should be the natural party of the farming community. And again, often it's not always recognised that, farmers are a small percentage of the rural community,
Yeah.
but they are often the core of that community.
Yes.
And so many other professions and trades and businesses rely on farming,
Yeah.
that if farming goes, then there's a domino effect onto those other businesses.
Absolutely.
So I think, we need to make extra efforts to really identify with the farming
Yeah.
community, and thereby, capture more of that rural vote than we have done
Yeah.
in the recent past.
Yes.
Certainly historically, we used to gather a lot of it. We can't take it for granted. And
No.
at times, I think we have tried to take it for granted.
Yeah, I think you're right. And coming leading up to the general election, last general election, we did lose a lot of our farming support to Labour, mainly because they were sold a dream, and obviously we'd done things that had disappointed them.
Mm,
But I do feel like following the family farm tax, they do feel more aligned with the Conservative Party again.
yeah.
I think it's just like you say, showing that we're going that extra mile. And we've seen that with Kemi going to a lot of the fairs and the shows. And I guess we've just got to keep standing up for
Well,
them.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's good that they're now seeing, the lie that Labour sold them.
Yeah,
We can't rely on that just to push them back to
true.
us. As you say, we've got to reach out positively
Yeah,
and sort of pull the farming community back towards us by showing them, that we're listening, and developing through the policy process
yeah,
some policies that really address what they're looking for. And I think the other thing we need to overcome in the wider population, and help farmers overcome is, they're not looking for special pleading or
absolutely.
special treatment.
Yeah,
It's often painted that, farmers are just out for what they can get and the subsidy junkies and so on and so forth, and special treatment here, there, and everywhere.
yeah,
It's about helping make the case that that's not the case. There are strategic reasons for having a thriving agricultural sector so that
absolutely.
we're not overly dependent on imports. And on things like the farms tax,
Mm,
it's saying, well, there is good reason why historically there have been different exemptions and so on
yeah,
because of, the way people place value on agricultural land.
yeah,
And the fact that, the returns on agriculture are so low compared to other assets.
hmm,
If you just take a straight, here's the annual income divided by the value on paper of the asset,
yeah,
that's completely different from an agricultural enterprise than
yeah.
it is for, a factory or a shop or, a financial asset.
Yeah. And I think like even like the machinery is so expensive
Mm.
and the profits are so low. So it doesn't look as great as, Rachel Reeves might think it does on paper
No,
in
absolutely.
reality.
No, well, I speak to my parents and, they're certainly not,
Not best pleased.
living it up.
No,
But
yeah,
they love it. They
exactly. It's a
always
way
have.
of life.
Yeah, it's a way of life. And they wouldn't do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And so being in Bristol, you said you noted it was a city that was once represented by Edmund Burke and is now represented by the Green Party. Do you think that shift from Conservative to Green says more about changes within the Conservative Party or the electorate? And with the Green Party, I always bring this up. It feels like it's kind of like the Lib Dems. People think that they're soft and fuzzy and cuddly, but they have increasingly become a party of social activism. What do you think that says? And where do you think Bristol will move in terms of parties like the Corbynista party and things like that? It's a
Yes, yeah,
very
well,
big question there,
it's a
sorry.
very very good question. I mean, living in Bristol is fascinating, and I
Yeah,
live in what is now Bristol Central, the constituency. But you're right that if you look at the journey, it used to be Bristol West.
yeah,
So until '97, it was Conservative for most of its history. It then went Labour, it then went Lib Dem, it then went back to Labour, and now it's Green.
right.
So it really does show that journey.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's not so much about changes with our party.
yeah,
I think it's about demographic changes specific to
right.
Bristol.
Yeah,
And one of the key trends in Bristol has been an increased student population,
yeah,
but also just demographics moving into Bristol. So
mhm,
there's lots of sort of young professionals moving out of London.
right.
It's become very trendy. It's a great place to live.
Yeah,
It's one reason why I live there. Um, so I think there's been those shifts and
mhm,
also national political shifts,
yeah,
between the parties and demographic shifts. But it is a fascinating place. Um, in terms of what it, sort of points our party towards, I think it does show limited pointers and lessons for
yeah,
the rest of the country. Bristol is now an enclave similar to parts of London
yeah,
where, to be honest, we've got a very limited chance of winning in central Bristol.
right.
But in some suburbs, we do have chance of winning.
Yeah,
And as one of the core cities within the country, we
mm,
do actually have a good councillor representation in Bristol,
nice.
probably better than any of the other core cities because we focus on the suburbs
Right.
where we have the best chances.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned the Corbynista party, whatever it's called
Yeah,
this
your
week.
party, his party.
I think that it's going to be fascinating to see how that
Yeah,
translates there. I'm certain there will be a big constituency
yeah,
in Bristol for a Corbyn party,
definitely. With
uh,
the students for
with
sure.
with the
Yeah,
students and like I say, the demographic that have been attracted to Bristol.
yeah,
That's almost become self-reinforcing. It's become quite a left-wing city
yeah,
because lots of people think, oh, that's the kind of city
yeah.
I'd like to live in because
True.
I'm left-wing.
Yeah, yeah.
And we saw, last year in the general election, we saw absolutely daggers drawn in Bristol Central,
Right.
the fight between Labour and the Lib Dems. And it showed, apart from anything else, it showed absolutely that the Greens can really campaign,
Right.
have the best, up there with the best campaigning techniques,
Hmm.
targeting. There were several things that I received that implied to me that they were very clear on the fact that I wasn't either Labour or Green.
Wow. Yeah.
Whether they knew I was a Conservative or a Lib Dem, I don't know, but it was definitely trying to squeeze my vote
Right.
to
Nice.
choose Green, not Labour.
Yeah.
Very similar to the kind of leaflets that we would send out, just
Yeah.
with the names of the parties replaced.
Yeah.
So if a Corbyn party comes along, then it's going to be a fascinating battle.
Yeah. You know, four-way battle there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I guess you've got reform. I guess reform's not really going to do
I,
that
I
well
don't
in
think
Bristol.
reform, no, but who knows?
You never know. You never know. And so, obviously, you, like we said, you've been campaigning for a quarter of a century. I like saying it like that. It sounds it's really big.
It makes me feel old.
Sorry. So 25 years you've been campaigning, knocking on doors. How do you think campaigning has changed, or is, pounding the pavements, knocking on doors still the best way?
I think it still is the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all those old lessons, and I can remember the first times was standing as a candidate locally. It's still very much the same. Go out, canvass, collect the data.
Mm.
Go out. If you find people who should be postal voters, encourage them to become
Yeah.
postal voters. Early in the year, then begin to narrow down your targets,
Right.
speak to the people that matter. Do postal vote knock-ups, then obviously on polling day, do the traditional knock-up.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think has changed is the introduction of knock, drop, and collect
Yeah.
and
I like
surveying
that. Yeah.
people, which I'm a big fan of as well. I call it the Goldilocks technique because you don't spend too much time talking to people
Yeah.
like canvassing,
Mm.
if you've got limited resources. It's better than leafleting because you do actually have some face time,
Right.
but it's that kind of happy medium where you
Yeah.
speak to people, they can see a face, they can see you're human, but you're not taking too much of their time and you get the data back at the
Yeah.
end.
That's
So
really
I think
good.
that's probably the biggest
Mm.
innovation, and I'm a big fan of knock, chop, and collect.
Yeah, I learned that actually in Surrey. That's where I first did it. And everyone really enjoyed it. They oh, I'm going to do this for my cup of coffee. It's like,
Yeah.
this is great. Such engagement.
And as people say to me, they say I would consider myself, they would say,
Yeah.
a really good canvasser,
Yeah.
but very rarely do I get a phone number or an email address.
Right.
But on
True.
Knock, Drop and
True.
Collect, you routinely
That's so
get
true.
that information.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I also have a family friend, and they live in Westminster, so it's slightly different, but they got a survey through and they were so excited. They were, oh, we got the crime survey. And people feel like their voice is heard, they're
Mm,
getting an input, which I think is really important
yeah.
in
And
politics.
it's really good as a counsellor. It gives you really actionable
Yeah.
information on what's bothering people,
True.
whether it's council level, I'm concerned about swimming pool provision in the local area, or traffic levels generally, or
Yeah.
council tax, right down to there's a pothole outside number 53, can
Yeah.
it be fixed?
Yeah.
And you get all this data and you can really do things with it.
That's it. But the key is to actually do things with
Absolutely, as
it.
all good counsellors should do.
Indeed. All good
And
conservative
then not just
counsellors.
do things with it, but then do a
Tell
pen
them you've
touch.
done it. There we go.
Yeah,
We've cracked it,
yeah,
guys.
drop it around to the road and tell them that you've done it.
There we go. So thinking with your chairman hat on, you've travelled up and down the country as the vice president and now chair. You've seen a lot of associations, how they work. We know, like I'm in KBCFC, Kensington, Chelsea, Bayswater, Fulham, and we're huge. But then I've been to other associations where there are like 20 people. In the associations where it's slightly smaller, what can we do to help them campaign? Is this a case of where like digital needs to come in, or is it a case of knocking on doors, getting more volunteers, or a bit of everything?
Yeah, I don't think digital is the solution to everything. I think
Yeah,
everyone should be doing some digital
yeah,
campaigning. All associations should have some sort of online presence.
yeah,
Facebook tends to be the easiest one,
right.
and is most engaged with. So I would say would be the starting point.
Yeah,
From there, you can go on to Instagram and TikTok, Twitter perhaps, although that's less used by the general population.
right.
But I think whether you're KBCFC
Yeah,
down to a much smaller association,
yeah,
having a Facebook page is probably the bare minimum.
yeah,
Um, but then I think for the smaller associations, it's about reducing the step to doing campaigning.
right.
So making it as easy as possible,
Yeah,
having, a toolkit, I think is a real help.
yeah,
Back when I can remember myself, when I was a deputy chairman political, I used to sit there with my computer, Microsoft Publisher. We didn't have an agent, we couldn't afford one.
yeah.
So I used to do all of the election addresses. I used to
Nice.
set up my template or download it from CCHQ, but then do all of it myself,
Yeah, that's good.
customize the names and the ward names and
Wow.
replace the text and all that. Toolkit has been a huge
Right.
advance, but we need to make it even easier for,
Yeah,
whether it's a candidate or a chairman themselves or a deputy chairman to do that in these smaller
yeah,
associations, to just knock up a leaflet,
true.
and then put it in the hands of campaigners wanting to go out, doing the calling cards,
Yeah,
making vote source as easy as possible to just do a standard target audience,
yeah,
so that you've got the most likely target voters only on the sheets,
right.
or downloaded on the app. We need to have an app
Love the
that's
app.
easy to use as possible, easy to download. If it was me, I wouldn't be faffing about with pins.
Yeah.
I
Oh
would
yeah,
have a
pins.
QR
Yeah, good
code
point.
that, if I've got an action day and I've got people turning up for the first time, where
So
I'd
good.
like to get to
Yeah.
is the lead person has a QR code which magically tells people what the
Yeah,
target
that's a
audience
great
is.
idea.
We're a few steps away from that.
Okay, cool.
Um, but that's how I think
Yeah,
we just got to make it so as easy as possible for the
right.
activists in those smaller associations to go out and do those simple things
Yeah.
like, deliver a leaflet, do some canvassing,
Yeah.
also the how-to guides, setting up an event,
Yeah.
nominating your candidates. And the other element to that is training,
Yes.
and having an online portal where people can just go in, They can either get the how-to guide, or maybe they can watch a video,
Yeah.
or they can look up the list and see the next opportunity to have an in-person online
Right.
training.
That's cool.
Because as good as kind of how-to guides are, or even pre-recorded training,
Yeah.
there's nothing quite like being on a session with other
True.
human beings, and you can
Yeah.
throw ideas around.
That's it.
So all of those things have a role to play. What I don't necessarily believe in is saying, right, you're an association that's got too few members, so we're just going to merge you with your
Yeah.
neighbour and create a federation. I think you've got to do that where the local activists are willing to do
Right.
it. You can't just force it from the top down.
Yeah. I think some people are kind of struggling to figure also who to federate with. Like
Mm.
in like some associations I've been to recently, they're very close to others. Like, do I go with the Oxfordshire one? Do I go with the Berkshire one? Do I go with the... It's like trying to figure out and also do it based on what they think is going to happen with the devolution
Yes.
changes and boundary redrawings and things like that. So there's a lot to figure out for people. But
Yes, and that's something we're trying to figure out
yeah,
ourselves, as a national officer team and at CCHQ is, in future, should more activities, whether they're CCHQ or associations or both,
yeah,
be built around new, bigger unitary
yeah,
councils, or even, mayoral areas,
yeah,
bigger areas or regions.
true.
But, as Conservatives in general, I think we're much more bottom up
Yeah,
and rather than top down.
yeah,
And we've, bottom up, we've seen some new federations coming together since
yeah.
the general election, because the local associations have come to their own conclusion that, yeah, we'd like to
Good
join up,
idea.
we'll be more effective.
Mm,
And, we've supported them all the way.
yeah, I think that works really well, especially in like opposition type seats. Like Lambeth and Southwark are a really good
Mm.
federation because it's like there are so many small constituencies, but realistically not going to win all of them. So they can kind of pool their
Yeah.
resources, which is quite good.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to start wrapping up because I've taken up so much of your time, but it would be remiss of me as a former parliamentary candidate and not to talk about selections. And I know my fellow hopeful candidates out there will want me to ask. So it's already been quite radical. You've removed the relisting process, and some might argue have leveled the playing field. And the party has outlined that it is now looking for 4 C's, so charisma, conservatism, cleverness, and communication. How will this be judged, and is the entire process changing? And are we allowed to know yet?
Well, it's still a work in progress. We've
Okay.
tried to be as open as we can be throughout,
Yeah.
and I know that's been recognised by many. You can never be open enough,
Yeah.
and but we've tried to take a different tack. So we put out some proposals for consultation.
Okay.
We had a lot of engagement back in May and June, and that's all been fed in.
Yeah.
It now goes to the candidates committee to come up with detailed
Right.
rules. I don't think, and I don't think anyone would have expected us to throw the whole thing up in the air
Yeah.
and rebuild it. So a lot of work was done in the last Parliament to professionalise the process,
Yeah.
the assessment process, the stage 1, the stage 2, the kind of scoring model that sits behind it. And those are all very solid foundations. So we're not really looking to rip all of that up.
Cool.
So we're keeping a lot of that. And that, apart from anything else, that takes a lot of time, effort, staff resource, and we would have to
True.
delay the whole process. So what we're trying to do is, within that framework, to make changes that address problems that people have perceived.
Right.
So if I just take one of those C's, a really important one,
Yeah.
conservative,
Yeah.
there was a perception, and I think it was justified. I used to be an assessor, and the point about are you a conservative was one question or
Yeah.
maybe 2 questions out of an hour and a half interview.
Right.
And that didn't feel to be enough
Mm.
for obviously such a vital
Yeah.
attribute. So what we're looking at, and this is still being debated and the practicalities being worked out, is that we certainly increase the proportion of that interview, which
Right.
is testing people's conservatism,
Yeah.
really going into, probing that rationale as to why
Yeah.
they're conservative. It might even be that we pull that out into a separate mini interview,
Right.
because it might be that we have different people asking those questions.
Yeah.
But that's to be determined. But I hope that gives an insight in
Cool.
that we've taken on board the justified concern that
Yeah.
we don't have don't test conservatism enough,
Yeah.
and we're coming up with a practical way to address it.
I think there are a lot of candidates who'll quite enjoy that, to be fair.
Good. Yeah. Well, and that's another point is we want to, when we say we test people's conservatism, that's not, well, are you, we're looking for this template
Right,
of
right. Are you a
conservative.
One
Well,
Nation?
exactly.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you at this point on the spectrum of conservatism?
Yeah,
We don't mind where on that spectrum you are,
yeah,
as long as you can justify it. You've got a well-formed view of why you're a
yeah,
conservative.
yeah.
And, you're going to have to go out there and knock on doors and justify
Absolutely.
it. So we're going to test you first as to whether you can justify it.
Yeah.
So
And also, you want to be talking to a whole new generation of hopeful conservative voters. So you need to really know who
yeah,
you are and why people should
you need
become
to go out
conservative
and
voters.
sell yourself and why you are a conservative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that leads me to my next question. Julian, why are you a conservative?
Well, um,
No pressure.
why am I a conservative? Well, I think I would go back to almost what I said about farming.
Yeah.
I would say it's inherent in many ways in my farming background.
Yeah.
Those principles of being self-reliant,
Mm.
working hard,
Yeah.
but being able to achieve things through working hard,
Yeah.
that give you the rewards from that hard work.
Yeah.
But there is a sort of interdependency as well. There is a community aspect
Yeah.
which you might not always think of as being, conservative out there alone, dog eat dog.
Yeah.
But actually, being part of a community is part of my conservatism as well.
Yeah.
That comes from being part of a small rural community as well. So hard work, self-reliance, aspiration,
Yeah.
getting to where you want to get to through hard work.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned conservatism and you also mentioned dog eat dog, which made me think of the 80s and then made me think of Margaret Thatcher. And you said that you are, of your political idols, you're a big fan of Ronald Reagan.
I am.
Why Ronald Reagan over Maggie?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say over Maggie,
Yeah.
but I'm a great admirer of Ronald Reagan because I
Yeah.
think he had a great outlook on life, and he had that inherent optimism
Mm.
that really shone through.
Right.
And I'm actually in the middle of reading his autobiography, which is a thick book, but it just shines through all the time about
Yeah.
how sunny his outlook was, how optimistic he was.
Yeah.
He was an inherent believer in, the goodness in people
Yeah.
and what could be achieved if people worked hard, if they trusted themselves and each other,
Mm.
and also very patriotic. Obviously
Yeah.
he sort of returned the American dream to America after a period of darkness in the
Yeah.
60s and 70s, where America had lost it. So, and he's just a repository of great quotes,
Fair.
and I love so many of his quotes
Amazing.
that I just have to love the man. And it's also nostalgia. As you
Yeah.
say, I grew up in the 80s and I can remember Reagan on TV. I can remember Mrs. Thatcher on TV,
Yeah.
the summits they had together as well. And it just felt like a great time.
I love that. Optimism, optimism. And just before we go, what do you love most about being a member of the Conservative Party?
Um, I mean, for me, it's kind of putting the values into practice
Yeah.
and seeing people get elected as conservatives.
Yeah.
I used to get elected myself externally. Now it's great to help other people. And when you see people that you've been and campaigned with get
Yes.
elected, that's a huge feeling. Um, and also as you go on, you just, get to know and befriend so many people
Yeah.
within the party. And
Yeah.
to go to conference, for example, and to meet people, catch up with people is a great thing.
Yeah.
But it's to feel that you're part of something that is bringing conservative principles to the way people live their lives, getting people elected to councils,
Yeah.
and obviously the ultimate aim to get a conservative government in place.
Here, 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 here. Well, thank you so much, Julian. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure for me too.
Thank you.